Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Stephanie Eto, and I'm a Senior Assistant Director in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of California, Berkeley campus. I am so happy to be here with you all today to speak with you about admission to the University of California system. Today, I hope to provide you with a brief introduction into the UC system and then really dive into what the application process is and what it looks like, and also provide you with some tips on how to present a very strong UC application. As someone who is in the office and reads hundreds and thousands of these applications every year, I have firsthand knowledge on what it is that we look for in our students and what it is that presents a very strong applicant, and I'm excited to be able to share with you some of the advice or the tips that I have from all of the experience that I have reading these applications, particularly around parts of the application that I think students often stress out about because it seems like it's such a mystery. I'm referring specifically to the extracurriculars and also the personal insight or PIQ, sometimes students refer to them as essays, that portion of the application. I'm very excited to be able to share some tips with you. Also, we're going to go over some of the changes in the application process and requirements that we've seen in this past year. Hopefully, I'll be able to address a lot of the most frequently asked questions that we've been getting throughout this process. And I'm going to be presenting a lot of information to you in a very short amount of time. I want you to all rest assured that all of this information is available on our websites, whether it's the University of California website, admission website, or the respective admissions websites of all of our different campuses. Lots of valuable information. Also, at the end of this presentation, I will provide you with some links and some good places to start as you are navigating this college application process. Hopefully that sounds good. And let's launch into the presentation. I cannot launch into talking about applying into the University of California system without introducing the University of California system to you. So what are the UCs? We're a system of 9 undergraduate campuses that you can find throughout the state of California. Our northernmost campus being in Davis, UC Davis, all the way down to the south in San Diego, UC San Diego, or UCSD for short, and then everywhere in between. All of our different campuses, we have some similarities. We also have some differences. So it's important that you are doing your research as you try to figure out which campus might be the right one for you, or which campuses might be the right ones for you. You'll want to figure out what is similar, what is different, what does one campus have that another campus doesn't have. One big thing that we share in common, or one big similarity or commonality amongst all the UC campuses, is that we share an application. We use something called the UC app or the UC application, which is different from the California State University system or the CSUs. They have their own application. And then other institutions that you may be looking at that use something called the Common App or the Coalition app, or even some institutions have their own application specific to their school. We do not use any of that. We use one single application called the UC app, although you do not have to fill out a separate application for every UC you are interested in. You fill out one central app and then you check the boxes of the campuses that you are interested in applying to. I want to go over the timeline. For those of you who are applying for fall 2021 admissions, the application is open. Every year it opens on August 1st, and you have an opportunity to get in there, establish your account, start filling it out, make your profile, and then you have to submit it in the month of November. There is a fee that is assessed per campus that you want to apply to, and there's a built-in fee waiver in the application to see if you might qualify for that. I want to take a moment here to talk about how UC does not have an early action or early decision process. And for those of you who might not be familiar with what early action or early decision is, it's a way for you to tell a school that they are your #1 choice by applying on a different timeline, an earlier timeline. Now, students often get confused because the UC application timeline looks like an early action or early decision timeline at other schools because our application is due in November. But please remember that we do not have early action or early decision, and that is our regular application time period for everybody, regardless of whether you're applying as a first-year freshman or a transfer. Now, you might be thinking, how do I choose which campus is right for me? Out of all of the different 9 undergraduate campuses, how do I know which one I should choose? Now, there's a lot of different things that you want to consider when you're thinking about which university you might want to spend the next 2 or 4 years of your academic journey. And these 3 questions are really just 3 of the most basic questions. There's a lot more to consider, but this is a really good start as you try to figure out which campus might be right for you. The size of the campus. And by size, it can refer to both the physical size, but it can also refer to the population. How many students are on that campus? For example, within the UC system, UC Berkeley is one of the largest campuses in terms of population. We have over 30,000 undergraduate students, and with our graduate students, we have over 40,000 students on our campus. So we are one of the larger campuses within the UC system. That's something to consider for you. Do you want to be on a campus with a lot of other students, or would you like to be on a smaller campus or a less populous campus? Location. As you saw from a previous slide, we are located throughout the state of California, but not just what city are we located in or what town are we located in, but setting. Or is it an urban campus? Is it a more rural campus? Is it next to a beach? Is it on a beach? Is it in a forest? These are things that you want to consider because you might want to spend some time not just on the campus that you are at or attending, but also you might want to spend some time off campus, whether you want to pursue community service activities, or maybe you want to do an internship, you want to get a job off campus. These are all things to consider as you're thinking about which UC campus might be right for you. And certainly last but not least, what major do I want? What academic area am I interested in? And does the UC that I'm applying to have that? We have various similarities and differences when it comes to academic programs. There are certainly programs that you can find at certain campuses that you won't find at other campuses. And then there's majors that you can find at any single UC campus. Even if 2 different UC campuses, for example, offer or have a College of Engineering, the majors that reside within those colleges of engineering can be different depending on the campus. So if there's a major that you are absolutely sure that you really want that major and that's the only major that you want and you're not open to any other major, you want to make sure that you're doing your homework and seeing, is the UC that I'm applying to, do they have that major? And you want to make sure that you do that research early on because there's a lot of different areas to research, and make sure that you have done your homework when it comes time to the application, because the policies and the procedures and an application process can look a little bit different depending on what academic area you're interested in. I'm going to throw a couple different facts and figures at you about the undergraduates on our campuses. 82% of the undergraduates within the UC system are California residents. We are a California public state institution, and so we're always going to be answering to the residents of California. 40% of our students are actually first generation, which means that neither parent or guardian has graduated from a 4-year institution. And about a third of our students are coming to us from the California community college system. I'm going to be talking about 2 different pathways into the UC system, and the requirements are different depending on which pathway you choose to come in. But I will take a moment right here to reiterate that in the state of California, we have an agreement between the California community colleges and also the 4-year state schools, the CSUs, the California State Universities, or the UCs, the University of California system. The agreement is that students who are interested in transferring are going to do the first 2 years of their 4-year degree at a California community college before transferring to a 4-year state institution. I often get the question of, can I transfer from another 4-year institution to a UC? And the answer is yes, it is possible. However, priority is always given to California community college students, and the majority of our transfer students are coming in from the California community college system. Also, the transfer pathway is a very big pathway into the UC system, and about a third of our students, as you can see, come in from the transfer pathway. That's true in the UC system, and that's certainly true on the Berkeley campus as well. About a third of our undergraduate students are coming in from the California community colleges. One of the most frequently asked questions that I get from students and families is what makes a strong UC applicant, or what is it that I can do in my high school or in my community college that makes me a strong applicant? And oftentimes they want a recipe when they ask me this question. They want me to give them a list of, if you do this, 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 and this, then you are guaranteed admission into UC. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. Or maybe fortunately, that's not how it works. There is no recipe. There's nothing that I can hand you that says if you do this, then you are guaranteed admission into the UC system, with a few exceptions, which I will mention with the transfer pathways. For us, we don't have a recipe. However, I can sort of give you a couple of the ingredients that we look for, right? These are the types of things that, as I read your application, these are the types of things that I'm looking for in the students, because these are the types of things that we offer for our students. For example, academic engagement. All of our students are incredibly engaged, both inside and also outside of the classroom. 85% of our students are doing some sort of research or creative experience with faculty. The University of California system has been tasked in the state of California as the research institution. So we have research happening at every single campus in all different fields. Often when I say research, students think of, somebody who wears goggles and a lab coat and is pipetting in a lab every single day, which we certainly do have that type of research, but you want to remember that the academic offerings of the UC system vary from the STEM or the science, technology, the STEM fields, but also all the way into the arts, the humanities, the social sciences. There's lots of different academic disciplines, not just what you typically might think of as research, as evidenced by this photo or this slide. About half of our students are learning in some sort of internship or practicum or some field experience, meaning that they're gaining knowledge and they have a love of learning that they're pursuing outside of the classroom. 42% of our students are performing some sort of community service. Again, other parts of the UC application. Why do we ask for all of that information? Not just your grades, not just your courses. Why do we ask for all of the things that you've been doing outside of the classroom? Because we have students in the UC system and opportunities for students in the UC system to engage in their community, to engage in research, to engage in learning outside. And we want to know, given what you have currently had available to you, how have you taken advantage of those resources or opportunities? I also want to take a moment to talk about not just what it is that you need or what it is that you can do once you're at UC, but really also what kind of support do you have for the students on the campus? I think that's another frequently asked question that I get from students, is not just how can I get to a UC, but how can I succeed once I'm at the UC? And this slide illustrates our commitment to the diversity that you can find in the state of California. Students that don't always have a home or resources or are part of a community that aren't always acknowledged on other campuses, the UC system tries very, very hard to make sure that those students are seen and heard and have resources provided for them. So this is just a small example of the types of different groups of students that we have resources for, and we really want our students to be able to tap into those resources and be successful once they're on our campus. We understand in the UC system that in order for students to be successful, it has to be the whole student, right? Not just in the classroom, but really it's talking about the mental, the emotional, and the physical well-being of our students. I think right now more than ever, being that we've had to switch to our virtual learning, a lot of these services and resources that we provide to our students have had to shift. They've had to pivot into an online platform and atmosphere, but we've been committed to continuing those services because we understand that students, in order to be successful as students, need to be successful as people first. And so that's something that's really important to all of us in the UC system. Now I'm going to switch gears into talking about the specific requirements as a freshman applicant, and then I'm going to launch into talking about transfer applications or transfer admission and how that might differ and how that might actually be similar to freshman admission. So first I'm going to talk about freshman admission and what are the minimum requirements as a freshman applicant. In the state of California, high schools are organized, or the high school subjects are organized in what we call A through Gs. And that's what we look for as a University of California campus. We look for completion of A through Gs. What that refers to is the different subject areas: history, social sciences, lab sciences, English, etc., etc. Now, for a full list of the subject areas, the A through G requirements, I encourage you to visit the UC or the University of California admission website and look under freshman requirements, and you'll see a breakdown of all the different number of years of each subjects that are required, and then the number of years that are recommended. So the minimum requirement is completion of those A through Gs. And then another part of that minimum requirement is that for California residents, in those A through G courses, you must have a 3.0 UC GPA. And again, if you want to know specifics on how a UC calculates a GPA and what grades and what years are taken into account, you'll want to visit the admission website, the University of California admissions website, and you can look up how does a school calculate a UC GPA. So again, to reiterate, the minimum requirements as a freshman applicant are completion of A through Gs and a 3.0 as a California resident. If you are a non-resident, you need a minimum of a 3.4 in those A through G courses. Those are the minimums. Now, I know that you're all sitting there thinking, wow, there's something missing from this slide, which I will absolutely go over in a little bit. But before I do that, I do want to talk about a couple of the different programs. I'm not going to go into too many details, but I will leave it up here for you to do your research on. We do have some system-wide guarantees for freshman applicants, and we have something called Eligibility in Local Context, or ELC, where the top 9% of California high school graduates are guaranteed admission into the UC system. And there's also a statewide path. So whether you're the top 9% across the state or top 9% in your specific California high school that's under this program. If you're interested to know more about that, I encourage you to research that and also reach out to our admissions offices about this. Now I want to talk a little bit about selection in terms of what it is that we look for once we receive your application. So I was talking about the minimum requirements, right? So you have your A through Gs completed, you have a 3.0, great, the minimums. What do we look for beyond that as we're looking at your application? We're looking at the overall applicant pool. Who has applied to our campuses outside? It's not just your application, but also all of the other applications that we've received. Who's applied? What does our pool look like? We look at academic factors, and then we also have a comprehensive review. Every single UC campus does a form of comprehensive review, and what that means is that each campus looks at more than just your academic achievement. It can include things like the personal and school context, right? So what school, what's offered at your school. It can also be personal. And the trick with the personal part is that you have to tell us in your application. There is nothing that I can assume in your application. So I think it's really important for you all to realize right here that if you don't tell me, I do not know, right? A lot of these other parts of the application, what I call the narrative parts, so the extracurricular section and the personal insight question, where you in your own words get to tell me more about you. And you want to put as much information as you can in the UC application. I always tell students, no information is going to harm you or hurt you in this process. The worst case scenario, it's neutral. I will read a piece of information, it's not useful, I move on. It's never going to be a minus. The best case scenario is it gives me so much more information about you, or it gives me context about another part of the application. For example, what does that mean, right? For example, sometimes students may have struggled in a course and they have an explanation as to why they struggled in that course. Put that in the additional comments. Again, let us decide if it's useful or not. It's really important that you take the time to tell us as much information as you can about you because, like I said, I can't make any assumptions. I cannot read into your application what you do not put. So you have to put in everything you want us to know. Personal insight questions, or PIQs, are really, really important, and I'm going to go over tips on how to write effective personal insight questions, or PIQs, a little later on in this presentation. Now, I want to talk about a couple of the different changes that we have had from previous years. So a lot of changes happened in relatively quick succession, both as a response to sort of things that have been happening at the system-wide level for a while, and also in direct response to the COVID-19 situation. So something to note is, typically in previous years, A through G courses always have to be completed for a letter grade that gets calculated into the UC GPA. However, we recognize that a lot of schools went to pass, no pass for their winter, spring, and potentially summer of 2020. Those terms are those are the terms that we are accepting: pass, no pass, or credit, no credit for those A through G courses. We are not requiring students to take them for a letter grade for those terms only. The A through G requirements, again, we will not accept letter grades of D or an F to meet these A through G requirements. We will be accepting the pass and credit grades. There has been no discussion on or a final decision made on fall 2020, our current term that we're in right now. The UCs have not decided on whether we will accept pass, no pass. This only applies to winter, spring, and summer. This next slide is going to outline some of the changes regarding standardized tests. So this is what I mentioned before in an earlier slide when I said you might be noticing that there's something missing from the requirements slide that was there in previous years, which was the standardized test. What happened in the UC system is we have now suspended the requirement for the ACTs and the SATs. No UC campus is requiring you to sit for the ACT or the SATs. That is not a part of the minimum requirements for freshman applicants in the UC system. Each UC campus has made a different decision on what they will do with scores. If a student chooses to submit them, you will still be able to submit them if you would like. We will never hold it against a student if you do not have a test score. So please do not feel compelled to find a testing center. Your safety is the most important for us, and so we don't want people to feel pressured to turn in. There's different ways to show your academic ability and the rigor. We look at your curriculum, we're looking at the grades that you've earned, and some of this language around the testing has been very confusing for students and families, and so I encourage you to go to the University of California admissions website and look. They have a table that outlines what the various decisions are, and depending on which fall you are applying for, which admission cycle you are applying for, the differences in what's required. Right now, the ACT and the SAT requirement has been suspended. You do not need an ACT or SAT score. Okay. So this goes into the timeline for the next several years. So in fall 2021 and 2022, they've decided that submitting scores is optional. You can, and campuses may consider them. Again, it's campus specific. So if you are interested in specific campus policies, check in with the admissions offices of each UC campus to see what they are going to do with the scores that have been submitted. And then beyond that, it's just the complete elimination of using test scores, period. Now I want to switch over into transfer admission and what that means in the requirements for transfer admission. It is very different than freshman admission, and so make sure that if you are interested in coming in through the transfer pathway, make sure that you're following the transfer guidelines. There are also some similarities, which I will touch on, but let's first talk about the transfer admission, what that looks like. Again, we have a commitment in the state of California, a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 freshmen that come into all of our classes, we have 1 transfer student. Again, predominantly most of our transfer students are coming in from the California community college system, and there's different resources that are there to help you organize your courses. The transfer admission planner is a great way to sort of start and organizing and keeping track of what courses you're taking. We're going to go over some pathways, and we're also going to go over the transfer admission guarantee, which is the one exception that I said earlier when I said no one single factor guarantees your admission to the UC system. This is the exception. Talking about the basic requirements, we have a 7-course pattern, or what we call the general education pattern, that you have to complete. You also have to complete a minimum of 60 semester or 90 quarter units at the community college. And we require in the UC system a minimum 2.4 GPA for California residents and a 2.8 for non-residents. Now, this is a UC minimum, and so if you are interested in specific UC campuses can have different minimums, and also different academic programs within each campus can have a different requirement. So you're going to want to make sure that you're doing your homework on what the minimum requirements are for that particular major at that particular UC campus. The requirements are exactly as outlined in the previous, but then what happens beyond requirements? What are we looking for in the selection? So this is where you'll find some of the similarities that we talked about when I said freshman and transfer, not everything is different. So beyond the minimum requirements, we're also looking at all of the other parts of the application. We're doing a comprehensive review where we are looking at the personal insight questions, where we are looking at the extracurriculars, what you may have done. So we're looking at the entire application. So transfer students are also filling out an entire UC application, just like the first years or the freshman applicants are. Transfer pathways have been designed with students who want to apply to multiple campuses in mind. It helps to organize different areas, lots of different major options, and it outlines the sort of pattern of coursework that you need to complete at the California Community College before applying to transfer to a UC. And these are the 6 UC campuses that currently offer a transfer admission guarantee. And it's a guarantee to a specific major at one of the 6 campuses. And they have lots of different options available, but it's typically a set of coursework that you have to complete with a minimum GPA before you are offered admission or guaranteed admission into that program. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I encourage you to look up, we call it TAG for short, the Transfer Admission Guarantee. And that's important that you make sure that you're doing that research, because that is going to require you to plan out the courses and the timing of those courses to make sure that you are filling those or fulfilling those minimum requirements. Now, some changes that happened in response to COVID-19 for transfer students. Previously, we actually have a unit cap on how many units you can take pass, no pass at the community college. And we temporarily, because we understand that a lot of the community colleges also went into a pass, no pass or credit, no credit grading scale, we temporarily suspended the cap. So any units that you earned in the winter, spring, or summer 2020 with pass, no pass, those will not count toward the maximum number of pass, no pass units that you are allowed. We are also accepting pass grades for admissions purposes in our major prep courses, with a few exceptions. All right, now those are the minimum requirements. I do want to take a moment to talk about the financial aid piece. Because we have such a short time together, I'm not going to be able to get fully into what financial aid looks like and what that means. And I highly encourage you to reach out to financial aid offices on various campuses, and also visit the financial aid websites that we have, whether it's the system-wide or also individual campuses. There are tons of information available. Just some brief facts or some numbers that we often get asked for is the time to degree. How long does it typically take our students to graduate? It takes about 4.1 years is the average for our freshman applicants or freshman admits, and then about 2.3 years for our transfer students. Financial aid and the finance piece of it, it's important to remember that, if you are a student and you are dependent on your parents, then it's going to include the contribution from the parent. It's going to include the contribution from the student. And then also it's going to be institution, whether it's our specific institution or the state or even federal funding. So those are the partnerships that we have. And you always want to make sure that you're filling out a form that I'll go over in a little bit. This is a slide that shows you a typical average sort of cost of attendance for an in-state student. This varies across the different UC campuses. Tuition is set, but room and board can look different depending on the type of room and board that you select. And so keep in mind that this is a rough estimate of the total cost for an in-state student. 42% of our students graduate with no debt, and we have actually almost 60% of our students that don't pay any tuition at all, and about 3/4 of our students in the UC system get some sort of grant or scholarship. And so there's different ways and opportunities for our students to be able to finance their education, and it's important that you do your research on what's available and what you can qualify for on the various UC campuses. This is an interesting statistic that students always, I don't know if it makes sense to you now, but as you kind of do more research into universities, it'll make more sense, is the national average when it comes to debt once you graduate is $30,000, and the UC average is much, much lower than that. And that's something that is important for us to be able to continue for our students. Now, the financial aid piece, you're going to want to make sure that you're filling out something called the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It has already opened. It opened on October 1st. And make sure that you're filling that out by the priority deadline. That's the baseline of what we use to calculate all the different types of financial aid that you might qualify for on our campus. And then also spend the time to research scholarships, not just what's available on our campuses, but also private scholarships outside of our campuses. And it can be a daunting process to find those scholarships, but I think that if you spend the time, I always tell students, sometimes you have to apply for a scholarship that's $1,000, and it takes you a couple hours to write that essay to apply for that scholarship. But if you get that scholarship, that is a very, very high paying part-time job. If you think about $1,000 scholarship and you spent 2 hours on an essay, that's $500 an hour. It's very hard to find jobs that pay that. So again, taking the time to research the scholarship opportunities, both on campus and also outside of our campuses as well. Now, this is where I'm going to point you in the direction of a couple useful resources and general admission information and the selection process. And this is also where I want to take a minute to really talk about what makes a strong UC application. So I went over all of the minimum requirements. I went over, what it is that you do in the application, the academics, the requirements, etc. But what is it that really stands out to me as I'm reading an application? The personal insight questions are our way of getting to know an applicant. Those are where we really want to know more about you in your own words. We do not offer any sort of admission interviews, whether it's with alumni or within our offices, with the exception of a few highly specialized programs throughout our campuses. But for the most part, we don't offer any interviews, and these personal insight questions are our way of interviewing you. So we really want to know who you are in your own words. They're very short. It's a list of 8 questions that you select 4. For transfer students, there's a required question, and then you select 3 out of a list of 7. It does not matter which questions that you select. It's really which questions are going to tell us the most about you that you want us to know. We want to know students who are going to come to our campuses, not just succeed academically, but again, pursue all those opportunities, whether it's the clubs, the student organizations, the public service, the leadership opportunities, research, whatever that looks like, the internships, the practicums, whatever that looks like for that student. We need students who are going to take advantage of those opportunities on our campuses. And this is where we get a lot of information about what students have been doing currently. Not everybody is going to have the same type of extracurricular or personal insight question. It's going to look different for each applicant. And so I can't give you sort of a cookie cutter explanation of this is what we look for and this is great and this is not great. This is all I can tell you is tell us about you in your own words. Do not treat the personal insight questions like an academic essay. It really is more about who you are. It's more information based. It's not just about the other parts of your application and reiterating the information that you already put. If you already listed those extracurriculars, you don't need to mention it again unless you're going to go more into detail. Our website, the admissions website for the UC system, has some worksheets that the personal insight questions worksheets, they help guide you in the right direction of how to brainstorm and also how to write the various personal insight questions, how to maybe break down what each question might be asking and telling us who you are. So that's a really great resource for students that you can find on our website. All of our various campuses have a lot of different things on our websites to help explain every single part of this process and how to fill out the application. And I encourage you to check out those resources on the website as well. And I will say, you know, part of when I'm reading an application, the best feeling in the world that I get when I finish reading an application is, one, I'm confident that the student is going to succeed at the campus that I work at, which is Berkeley. And I see that because they've excelled in their academics, and also they've sought out the resources that they needed in order to excel. And also, in addition to the excelling in the classroom, I love when I read an application and I can really vision the student on our campus. I can really get a sense of who they are, what they might be interested in, the different clubs and activities that they might participate in, and that's the best feeling in the world. And so that's really what we're looking for in the extracurriculars and the personal insight questions. In your own words, a couple different things that we always tell students is some things that I see over the years that haven't been as helpful in the personal insight questions is when students talk all about somebody else and they don't talk about themselves. Sometimes students will talk about something else. For example, you know, there's a question that talks about your favorite academic subject. A student will talk so much and tell me so much about the subject that they forget to tell me about themselves. And so it's important to remember that they are personal insight questions. These are going to be really different than even the common app essays that you might be writing, or essays for other parts of the application, or other types of applications, I'm sorry. It's going to be very different. These are very unique to the UC application. They're very direct. If you had 5 minutes with an admissions officer, what would you want that admissions officer to know about you? That's how you should approach writing the personal insight questions. And I think with that, that is the end. Again, my name is Stephanie Eto. I work in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at UC Berkeley. Thank you so much for taking the time today to listen. All of these resources are available for you on our websites. We have different ways to engage with our admissions offices, whether it's through social media or on our website, so please continue to check that out. We also have a lot of virtual programming that's happening this fall in light of the fact that we cannot go out and visit the different schools and meet with you in person. So a lot of different ways to engage with us. Please check us out. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really, really, really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.